Welcome to Life, Death, and the Law, presented by the law firm of Deason, Garner, and Hansen, hosted by attorneys Shawn Garner and Adam Hansen.
We took the opportunity, we took like a day prior to the conference getting started to visit some sites there in Boston, one of which was the Boston Tea Party boat. It's a recreation. I don't think it's the actual boat, but you go on this boat and you act like you're one of the colonists back in the day. And we started out kind of like these actors were all getting us all riled up, saying the British have passed this Stamp Act, and then the nerve of them, then they passed the Tea Act, which forced us to use only British tea. We couldn't sell any other tea, homemade tea or anything like that. And in addition to that, not only did we have to buy British tea, it was super nasty and gross because it takes forever to get across the ocean. So by the time it got here, most of it was moldy and gross. And then they had to pay taxes on that, and they didn't even want to drink it. So there's all sorts of underground things going on. Obviously, when a people is oppressed, obviously you start looking for other ways. So there's a black market of tea making and trade, and the housewives actually had a lot to do with that. They had their own underground society that was dealing with tea, and so anyway, we go to this little recreation of it, and we're recruited as these colonists to dress up and then throw tea into the bay there in Boston to show our rebellion in the dead of night. And I think we got done doing this little act or this little skit in that Boston Tea Party Museum on the ship. And Shawn, you turned to me and you said, I wonder, how do you think we would have actually been? You know, if we lived back then.
Yeah, whose side would we have been on?
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting question. And then we went through this whole thing, you know.
And the thing was, because it was actually a minority of the Americans that were for the revolution. They say maybe as many as a third, but 2/3 were not. 1/3 was maybe indifferent, and 1/3 was loyal to the king, and they wanted to remain subjects of the king. And so you think of it as this great revolution, everybody's uniting together to throw off the repressive government of England. That was not the case. This was a minority movement.
That reminds me, so in this same museum, we went to that it was pretty cool. It was like a 3D portrayal. Remember, we go into that room, and it was like a theater, and then they had like a colonist woman have an interaction with a loyalist lady, and they were just going back and forth, and it demonstrated the points of view back then. And like you said, most of the people, the majority of the people were loyalists to the crown. Why do you think that is? I mean, was it because they didn't want to make waves, they didn't want heat to come down on them? You think that's what it was, Shawn?
Absolutely. I think that people, when they have a general quality of life and a sense of security, they will continue in that path. And that is human nature. We want safety, we want security, and we will be willing to give up a lot in return for those things. And that's why I want to pay so much homage to our founding fathers, because they had both those things, safety and security. I mean, the British military was the strongest in the world, and they were being protected by the British military. They had just fought the French and Indian War, where the British supplied them the arms and the strategies to win that war. And so they were being protected by the strongest army in the world, and they were largely independent, being across the sea, number one, and they were given quite a few rights. They were one of the most free people in the world, even under the British government. So it took a lot of, I would say, inspired thinking of the divine nature of mankind in order for them to do what they did.
Yeah, and you said that they were living kind of, had they played by the rules, they still probably would have enjoyed a nice life, you know, had they played by the crown's rules. But it became so oppressive, specifically in Boston, because of their outward acts of rebellion. And so the crown responded. Any of you that have watched or read about this event, it was just time after time over the course of maybe 3 decades where the crown just started. They did the Stamp Act, and then they did the Tea Act. So they were targeting legislation towards these colonists in Boston to try and qualm the rebellion that was happening. And every act that they did made them even more defiant and caused this rebellion within, specifically with Sam Adams. and his crew, the Sons of Liberty. They started their own underground. I just think it's the coolest thing, this underground, stick it to the man kind of thing. It's totally American. And that's what I love about it. It's like, yeah, I feel that. Like when I have authority coming at me, my first act is probably rebellion. Yeah. That's, Tom, why I didn't go in the military, because I knew I would not be able to deal with authority, in a healthy way, right? And not to say that people that go into the military are sheep or anything like that. They just are better men than I am, or better women than I am, because they can deal with that. They know how to give honor, I guess, to an authority. I just have always had problems with that in my life. And so my first, this is just me speaking, but my first kind of thought is to rebel. And this goes back to COVID. So we're talking about the British Crown, right? And when we were back in Boston going through all this, I couldn't help but think of today and the taxation that we experience today and the oppressive nature of our government today. And I was thinking, man, it might even be worse than the Crown was back then. Because the taxes are so heavy and there's nothing I can do about it.
I think it is much worse. The Boston Tea Party was a 2% tax. 2%, they're throwing tea into the harbor. And now we've got people paying, 30, 40, 50% of their income. 40,
yeah. If you're over a certain amount of income, you're going to pay 40 to 50%. That's upcoming as the Trump tax plan expires next year. So this is not. There's a reason why everybody's leaving the United States to do business, is because this is not business friendly.
If you have questions or want to know more about something that was discussed today, please call the law firm of Deason, Garner & Hansen at 928-783-4575 or visit yumaestateplanning.com.